Nice, Alex.
And do we have anybody attending? Tennell's not a virtual attendee, is he?
No, he is like in the bush of Alaska.
Okay, so Chris is absent.
Minutes, anyone have any changes? Are we good to approve as presented?
I move to approve minutes.
Second.
Agenda? Are we set there? Any additions at all? Okay. Public comment. So this is for any non-agenda items. Jeffrey, I know you have something you'd like to say. I can. Oh,
Yeah, I do.
Down that foot there. Oh, it's on.
Jeffrey Bergeron. First of all, we came here because one, we just love Ellie's features. You guys did a great job, great design. We've ridden it a bunch of times, even with the namesake. And we came here because we wanted to encourage you to do kind of what Jay said, what critical edge, is that what you call it? Yep. And I understand that's going to be happening, just to kind of thin it out a little bit, because a lot of it was machine built. But it's just good work. I think it's a nice addition to the inventory. And also, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I hope you guys followed what happened with Nikki and Brad. What a hero they were. And I guess Duke was on the line as well with what happened on the 10-mile range. So yeah, when you get some time, learn to find out the whole story. It's pretty impressive. And I'll hang out a little bit for the one-way trail discussion. I can't wait for that.
we'll leave the microphone on.
He talks loud enough.
Yes, please come on up.
Very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Doozy Martin. I'm the executive director of Friends of the Dillon Ranger District. I've been with that organization for 10 years now. I took over as the executive director in January of 2023. I've been in touch with Scott Reed and Duke a little bit. I've been meaning to make one of these meetings for quite some time, and tonight's the night. So thank you all for having me. I just wanted to, I don't really have an agenda, so to speak, but as long as I have been involved with FDRD, the town of Breckenridge has been a huge supporter of ours. It's not lost on me that the town grants have just been submitted. My motivation here has nothing to do with the grant application that I have just put forth, but really more about the past and the present. So FDRD is coming into our 20th season next year. I've been with them for half of those years now, which is hard to believe. But we've literally grown 10 times. I just got our first Form 990 for our accountant sent that over to us. It was $74,000 was our annual budget. And so we've come a really long way. Had 1,000 volunteers out on about 60 projects last year. We've got some after school programming for youth. Youth remains a big part of what we do. Free education. We do some hikes, kayaks, bikes, skis, snowshoes, deliver free educational content to the public, and had hundreds of locals on that to continue to educate about our local high alpine environment here. And so we feel like we can do an awful lot with a little. For instance, a 4-hour trail project that we put on, if we get 15 volunteers out, the state of Colorado currently recognizes $31.51 for one volunteer hour. So if we pay our staff for planning, coordinating, and executing a project, it costs our organization between $500 and $800. But with the amount of volunteerism that we bring in, that can be worth $1,900, $2,000. So we can almost triple what we are able to produce based on a small amount of money. So I'm one of 4 full-time year-round employees. We have 2 seasonals to execute everything that we've done. But really the point is, I just wanted to come sit in on a meeting and thank you all for the past support. The future is unwritten. We're not here focusing on that this evening, but just really wanted to thank you for the support. Like so many other very worthwhile nonprofits in our county, we're extremely reliant on the generosity of businesses, governments, organizations, individuals. And so we're extremely grateful for that, and wouldn't be where we are today, 10 times larger than we were 10, 12 years ago without that support. So thank you guys very much for having me today, giving me this platform, and keep up the good work.
Doozy? Next, we've got officer elections. Want to talk about that at all, Duke? Or?
Well, we need a new BOSAC chair and vice chair. Thank you, Nikki, for serving as vice chair.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful job.
Thank you.
But that's up to you guys. We'll just take notes.
Started vice chair or chair?
Start with chair, and we'd look for a nomination from any of you for a chair.
I nominate Nikki La Rochelle.
Second.
Okay. And do,
All in
Well-
all in favor?
Okay. All in favor at 6? Great. How about vice chair?
Nominate Ross.
Seconds.
All in favor?
yes.
Okay, so that's Nikki as chair and David Rossi as vice chair.
Yeah. Note how expeditious we are.
Sure.
Yes. I guess we should welcome our newest member, Matt Powers. Welcome back to the dais.
Thank you.
Yes, we're so happy to have you filling Duke's spot. All right, so next, staff summary.
Yep. Any questions or comments on any of the items in staff summary? We'd love to provide more info on any of this stuff if you're interested.
What's a hiking pod?
Oh, that was slang for just an area that could have a concentration of hiking only trails. And I think you're referring to Little Mountain.
Right.
Yeah, I threw that on there. And, there already is the Little Mountain hiking trail and Trollstigen. Now that we control all those properties in the area, it might be worth taking a closer look and adding some more just hiking focused trails or hiking only trails. So by pod, I just meant cluster.
Is there, what's the schedule for, working on Nightmare on Baldy?
We are maybe this upcoming weeks doing some
Oh,
Nightmare,
great.
maintenance on Nightmare.
Rerouting the first, 50 yards of it?
That is on our work schedule, whether that's through some volunteer efforts coordinated with the county or possibly our staff or a contractor. That alignment has been flagged. We're just trying to coordinate efforts to see how much work is left here at the end of the season. But hopefully we'll finish it by the end of the season.
And is the Swan River Reach B site visit pretty firm? Is that when it's gonna happen and what time it's gonna happen?
I believe so, Catherine. Yes, that's pretty firm. That's a OSAC scheduled event.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to, oh, if you want to.
So it looks like we're sort of back at square one with McCain naming, and I wasn't sure that was where we left it. I thought we were talking Little Date, weren't we?
Yeah, I think Duke could probably speak to.
Yeah. That's right, but I think because we don't want to supersede any of the history of the indigenous peoples that we're still trying to learn about, I think it's not that Little Daisy's off the table, it's that the sentiment is let's gather all the information we can on that front and then revisit the whole naming convention with that information, not jump ahead and choose Little Daisy or something else and then later learn about some Ute tribal history that we wanted to be differential to.
Thanks, Bobby. All right, I think we're good to go to Breck history.
Larissa.
Friends. Larry, do you want to come down, please?
Thank you for the site visit today, Larissa and Larry. It's great. Oh yeah, just give it a mouse.
Hello. Okay. Well, first off, thank you all for making time this afternoon. Dave, we missed you, but I know you're very familiar with the mini mine site. So thank you all for making time to get up there and doing a little walkthrough of that site. I thought to kick it off, I'd like to walk through each project and talk through kind of how each one would work. But just, Kristen, you teed it up nicely at the site visit. You asked about our management plan, and we were back with you all a few months ago talking about that. So this is kind of a follow-up to completing that master plan, or that management plan rather, and trying to prioritize the sites that we'd like to take on next year because they meet several of the criteria that we've established in that management plan. So what you see in front of you today has gone through our board, and we talked about these as well as several other projects, but these are the ones that rose to the top for the board of directors. So we'll start off here with the Riling Dredge. And please interrupt me at any time, but we're going to kind of go smallest to biggest, or lowest budget to biggest budget. It kind of follows that track. So we'll start here with the Riling. So these are just some before and after photos from that stabilization that we did in 2018 and 2019. I'm going to view. Okay, come on here. Slideshow? No.
Reload.
Reload. Okay.
Black box. Second.
Help. Is my phone a friend? I'm sorry. Oh, reload this. Okay, there we are. Okay.
Now try the slideshow.
Okay. All right. Much better. Thank you. Okay, so there was that, yeah, before and after, which was a pretty sizable project for us. And for this year or next year, we're talking first about the punt here. The punt was the little dinghy boat or, workers boat that shuttled materials and the staff out to the dredge. And it's kind of down. Have any of you been to the punt or walked down to that little site? It's really close to the dredge itself, but it's on this little social path that's pretty well defined, which I'll show in a moment. And it's just sitting in the dirt. So we'd like to clean it out, put it on some treated timbers. And so it's up off of the ground. Really wouldn't require a whole lot in the way of machinery. We don't think it could actually probably be lifted with some really strong guys like Larry and Larry's friends. And then it would be in a better place. So here it is today. Here's that social path. I am in this photo on the left. I'm standing on the Riling Dredge Trail. And so it's pretty well defined. And then there's the punt there on the left. And we're looking at about $15,000 to do this work. It's not just the punt. We'd also like to do some additional interpretation at the Riling Dredge. I will say that, as I mentioned in the memo, I understand there's the sign plan that's going to be taking place for open space, or the Open Space and Trails Department. So we would certainly follow any guidance that is an outcome from that. planning effort. Okay. Reliance Dredge is kind of like a little hidden gem off of Wellington Road. It's the one site out of the 5 today that's just on town land. It's not jointly owned with the county. And these are some images of it up in French Gulch in the early 1900s. And here's what's left today. It's just off the Wellington Trail on Wellington Road, and you kind of have to make your way through the willows. And there's just a lot of vegetation that's taken over the dredge. We did do an initial stabilization here about 12 years ago. So the idea is to get some of these hanging branches off, do some thinning of the vegetation, and look at maybe doing a little social path that goes through the remains. What you see here was the superstructure. So that part above ground or above the water line, and the internal workings of the dredge is what's still kind of left there in the ladder well. So some of the same things we have at the Riling, it's just kind of sitting in the sediment now. So these are just a couple other photos. We would potentially need to do a wetland delineation. I think that's to be determined, but it's really more of a maintenance project. There might be a little bit more stabilization, but we're not talking about, digging the whole thing out or doing any extensive stabilization work here. Oops, sorry. Here's just a photo on the left of that little path that is right off the Wellington Trail. And there's that Wellington access point, Wellington Trail access point off of Wellington Road.
So that's the real access and this is just a social trail?
Yep, exactly. So on the right is how you would get to the trailhead, and then the social path on the left is kind of a little spur right off of the beginning of the Wellington Trail. There is no parking at this site. I think that is a potential concern. This isn't a project that I think would draw a lot of new people to it. It's really just kind of maintaining what's there. And I don't even know that you'd be able to see it from the road. So it wouldn't be another visual draw from Wellington Road, but there is a bus stop right there, and then good biking and walking access. All right, no questions thus far. Okay. In that one, we were looking at about $20,000 for some of the work at the Reliance. Also some interpretation, but again, in line with that sign plan. So Preston Town Site, this is a personal favorite of mine, I think, because it's got a bit more of that social history. A lot of our projects have focused on the mining structures themselves, the mills, the ore bins. And Preston was the town site that served Gold Run Gulch, the Jesse, the Extension, Dry Gulch, a lot of the locations up there. Preston was kind of that central hub for Gold Run. It had a post office. There's a boarding house here, a big, there was a residential complex as well. It, fell apart much like a lot of these little ghost towns, and there's not a lot left today. But this is that top priority cabin. There are 3 structures that are kind of remaining. A lot of it probably as the cabin with the yellow strap around it. And that's thanks to Larry last year. He did do that, as we were worried that it might actually just fall down over the winter. It doesn't have a roof and has got a pretty good lean to it. So here we would like to actually put a roof on it and really button it up and do it in such a way that people could not get inside. I know that that can be a concern, as well as the public safety, public access. So it would be something that would just be viewed from the outside. It is town and county, but there's like a little sliver of this cabin that may be privately owned. The cabin is potentially split in 2 with ownership. That owner is supportive of this project, and he also owns this cabin on the left. So it's just kind of a patchwork of ownership out there, as I'm sure you all know. And so this would be another one we would potentially look at trying to do something with that cabin on the left. And then the final one, which is really just that roof that's sitting on the ground, is there's not a whole lot we can do other than stabilize what's there. But that one is on national forests, which opens up a whole other can of worms. But we'd look at maybe doing a little cleanup work and stabilization there as well.
Melissa, how are you planning on keeping people out of that first one?
Yeah.
Good, just
So
be look in.
yeah, it would be fully fully closed off, and it would have a roof, it would have a door or some barrier that would not be one that you could open. There would be just no way to get inside of it.
Gonna still have a roof, that's the part.
Yes, yeah, it would need a new roof in order to stay upright. A lot of these, just like we've done with, the Wellington Orban and the Jesse Mill, the roof is what saves the structure for the long term. So if we want to save this one, we'll need a new roof. There are some other really neat archaeological remains at this site. Again, there's a great story to tell when we get to that point. And I think the broader Gold Run Gulch story is kind of enticing as well. You know, we've done some work in French Gulch with putting up interpretive signs. And I think Gold Run has that same possibilities there with some of the sites that are out there. Okay.
Marissa, with this one, do you envision people accessing that primarily by driving up Gold Run Gulch Road or more by foot or?
It could be any number. This is right on the road. This cabin, you can see the road on the side of the cabin there. So I think in summer months, it certainly allows people who may not be able to get to the site on their own to get there in a vehicle. It is, a popular road, and it's one that people could access vehicularly, but also, mountain bike or hiking, or I don't know.
I just wondered
Teleporting.
about where they park, but it probably wouldn't be that many
Oh,
folks.
yeah, I think,
ones.
when we've been up there, we have, pulled off to the side when we've been looking at it. And I think that's a good question, is whether that's a concern, but again, I don't think it would be a site that would draw a ton of new traffic, but it could, have some vehicular impact.
Sure.
Okay. That one, we've also got all the materials for the Preston project, and they're already on site. So if and when we can do that one, we're pretty ready to go. All right, Lorium. And, one thing I didn't do, but it's in the packet, was in the memo, is I did have a map of all these sites. I think most of you are pretty familiar with where all these are, but if we need to stop and access that Google Earth map at any point, please let me know. Right off of the Lorium trailhead are the old mill building, or what's left of the mill, along with a boarding house and a shop building and a more contemporary outhouse. And we are looking at, what's left of the boarding house on the left there. The shop below was restored to some degree, maybe 20 or 30 years ago. The roof will need some work at some point, but it's in pretty good shape, has some weird drainage. We can deal with that eventually. The boarding house, if we're going to do something, we need to do something soon. It is already kind of caved in at the roof, but it does have some of the interior framing that's still there, and that front facade and this side wall. Here's a photo of the front of that boarding house. And then, as you can see there on the right, there's the roof that has kind of caved in. This project, I think you could go, we need to have a roof on it to save it. I think we are also cognizant that there is some planning work that needs to be done at the Lorium from the open space perspective. So if we're going to do anything next year, it would really be to do some bracing and really prevent any further collapse, and really keeping what's there would be the ultimate goal in the near term. And I think, Larry, did you want to speak any more to this one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then just kind of a side note on this one, it obviously has the mining history. It also has a bit of, again, kind of fun, more recreational history. Barney Brewer, for those of you who knew Barney, long time Breckenridge kind of pioneer, ski pioneer. He had the Breckenridge ski touring experience, I believe was the name of his operation. And so he led Nordic ski tours from this site. And it was kind of a hub of backcountry recreation when he had that business. And it's kind of fitting that that's the case, given that it's a nice popular place for skiing today. All right. And finally, the mini mine machine shop or compressor shop. So I guess maybe for the benefit of anyone who's here who wasn't on the site visit, we'll kind of walk through some of the same things we did at the site visit. And so we are talking about the compressor building, which if you look in the right photo is the building on the left. The mini was a pretty long established operation with the underground mine, the compressor shop that held a lot of the machinery and the compressor and the blacksmith forge. And then there was also a boarding house, which you can see in the photo on the left down below. It had its own mill, and then it had the big trailer shaft, which was sunk vertically into the ground, and which we still have the remnants of today as well. So this is what we have today. Most of the structure is on the ground. It's about, or was about 35 feet by 50 feet long. And there was a question about kind of the height at the site visit. And the top beam, we think, was at about 14 feet, but then the gable on top of that would be an additional 12.5 to 13 feet. So that's kind of the dimensions we're talking about that would be on that original footprint for the mini mine. Larry has really done a ton of work to investigate this site and think through how this could work. And, Larry has been the brainchild behind some of our other bigger projects. So I'd like to probably just turn it over to Larry here. These are some of those current photos. Here are the elevations if anyone wants some more detail on the dimensions of what it would be for the new structure that would mimic what was there. And then this is kind of the best rendering we can get for a few $100s of what that new structure would look like. You can see inside there the gable end walls, which we talked about at the site visit, which would be repurposed. Some of that back wall that would need that retaining wall, that material, and then unearthing the forge, the compressor foundation, and then the hoist on the right there that served the trailer shaft. And so Larry, why don't you go ahead and give more detail, please?
So just a quick summary for those who weren't there. This building is identical to the original structure. And so the columns are just, the inside of those columns are rub against the outside original structure of the original building. So what you're seeing is a building that represents very closely what was there originally in width, depth, height, and the new building will have old building components as a facade over the true structure. For instance, the gable end wall that you see there is, excuse me, all historic fabric. The windows, the two windows, the corrugated siding, and that will be placed into the new structure. And you're looking through the structure at the back wall. All of that material is original structure. And we'll probably add to that sheathing that's back there with salvage materials from the debris. And our goal is to hit about 40% of original material in the structure. Previous projects in Breckenridge, when you hit about the 30% point of original materials, they consider it preservation, not rebuilding. And so we would consider that this project is preservation of the mini mine, machine shop, and compressor house. Glad to answer any questions.
What's the timeframe to get to this? How long will it take? Will it take?
The project itself.
Yeah.
So one of the big parts of this project is to retain the hillside, the cut slope behind it, which has come down, and that's what knocked this building down. And we're still going through engineering, and we're trying to get a grasp of what kind of a project it is. We think we have an idea. We think this could all be done in one season, but that would be the retaining wall and the new construction. But until we get engineered sets of plans, that we probably shouldn't commit to a one season fix on it. The good news is that we have our contractor from the Sally Barber project and the Jesse Mill project, Ty Courtwright. And Ty Courtwright actually feels that this project can be done in, he's not afraid of this project as much as he was, for instance, of the Jesse Mill. Because essentially this is all new construction that you're putting a facade of older materials up against. So we will be getting back to you with an exact schedule depending on how we're going to engineer and construct the retaining walls behind the structure. The structure itself, pretty straightforward once you get all the materials sorted and organized and out of the way.
I had a question, Larry, and maybe Larissa too. And I'm sure the board has talked about this a little bit, but it seems like in the past, most of the projects that you guys have taken on have been like structures that are already standing, stabilizing them, or, you know, that type of work. So this is kind of, like you say, maybe it's not new construction. There's obviously some new construction with the superstructure there, but how does the board view that in terms of, does that still fit into your guys' wheelhouse in terms of, you know, things that are high priority?
Want me to take that one? So we view it as a spectrum of projects that we take on, and we've been very fortunate, and we've picked a lot of the low-hanging fruit already. This project is possible because a lot of the components of the building are still relatively intact within the debris pile, and they are in relatively good shape. So the wood of the gable end walls is, if I crawled underneath there and looked up at that wood, it's protected by the fact that it's not in contact with the ground. It's sitting on the debris pile, other debris that is rotting, but not the wood of the gable end walls. The gable end walls fell to a large degree with the corrugated siding up. And so we're fortunate that the building may not be standing, but there's major components of the building that are still in good shape that we can put back up there. The back wall is entirely, I would say it's 90% there, that back wall, or over. And it's just been pushed over in the middle. And you can go through the debris pile and you can see exactly what's happened to it. Once we do the retainage, that wall is just, we're just going to stand it back up in place. So the building hasn't totally fallen down because that back wall and those two corners are still entirely structural. They're in place in their original position. It's just been pushed over in the middle. So we view it as a building with great potential that has not totally collapsed, that has good structural components that can be utilized and put a structure in place that is identical to the old structure in the sense that those gable end walls will be exactly where they were before. That back wall will be exactly where it was before, and it'll just be braced by the new construction. So in our view, we're taking a building that, yes, partially has fallen down, but it's got great bones to it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Have you thought about the programming in terms of it's kind of seems like it'd be an attractive place for people, you know, coming by in the trail to walk into and utilize it to some level? I'm sure there's some type of interpretation you want to do. Any other thoughts on that?
I think, the main thing here is that it will require substantial interpretation. So when people come up, they understand the connection to the compressor building. I think we have the resources, primary resources to help us do that. It's also part of a guided loop that we already do out in French Gulch. So there's certainly the continuation of that. But I would see the main program being the interpretive signing to help tell the story.
I have one more question. I learned a lot on the site visit already, so thank you. A lot of these more recent ones that you guys have restored are kind of walled off from exploration. This one's a whole kind of a rendering. So do you anticipate people will be able to walk through this building? And I mean, maybe some of the interpretation will literally be inside the structure?
Yeah, I think that would definitely be part of it, and interpreting some of those artifacts that are currently buried under all the debris, like that blacksmith forge and the compressor foundation. That would be a part of it. So I think, yes, it would be a place that people would walk inside under.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Is it, so the first part of this would be if we would want to recommend this project moving forward, is that what would be most helpful to Breck History and or Town Council?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just the process for any of these, except for the Reliance, which is just town owned, is that we would go, you all and then town council, and then we go through the same process at the county level. So we'd be seeking feedback, input, support from OSAC and then the BOCC as well.
great. Jay, can I pick on you to start? You want to tell us your thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I think all the projects that you put forth are extremely noble and protect history. And I'm incredibly sensitive to the team that you have at this moment and how I feel like this is a golden age for restoration, and that to take advantage of it is in everyone in the community's best interest. I do have some reservations on exactly what is going to be the casualties of bringing equipment up. I think Larry, me and you talked about perhaps flagging the past just so that there's a real understanding of what might get lost and what's what's entailed in moving that scree field into the mountainside or removing it. But I think looking at the potential results and how effective it will be, especially in general, but especially compared to the condition right now, is remarkable. And I think that the fact that it will be 30 feet closer to the mountain, to the hillside than it currently is, actually providing a bigger area for multiple use, hikers, bikers, people just enjoying it, is very attractive. And yeah, I just applaud and commend you for all the work that's been done and due diligence, answering the questions and foreseeing the questions that were going to be out there, and very supportive.
Thanks, Jay. Bobby, do you have any?
I'm excited to see this happen, especially with your plans for interpretive signage. I think that's such a critical aspect of any of this, because without that, people will look, oh, that's strange, and move on. Whereas we have such a story to tell, and I'm very happy that that's a big part of what you're planning on doing. So I think it's great. I'm looking forward to all of it.
David?
I think it's great. I think it's a testament to the work you guys have been doing, especially with your portfolio. The Jesse's just fantastic and you've done a great job. So I expect no less here.
I don't really have much to add. I think Jay's comments really resonate that we're at a point where it feels like a little bit sense of urgency that a lot of these buildings, well, this one has obviously already fallen down and looks a little bit more of a mess than an interesting relic at this point. So I look forward to seeing it kind of restored. And it also does reinstill the sense of urgency that these buildings are falling down. So we kind of have a narrow window right now. It's up to this decade, I think, to save a lot of these buildings. So I'm excited.
I feel the same way too. I think so much of French Gulch has become a destination with B&B parking lot and families, and it took us just a few minutes to walk up there, but for a lot of families, it's the big hike and a lot of little kids running around. And I think to have something, kind of a jackpot at the end is a big deal. So I think that structure rather than that pile of debris is an enormous upgrade. Obviously, I share Jay's concern about access. And I kind of come back to the fact we're comparing it to Hannah's Way a lot in the equipment and things like that. It made me think that used to be a very primitive trail that was really unique to get to. And although this one is a lot more front country and a lot more used, Hannah's Way is nothing like it used to be. It's a super chunky 2-track that's kind of gouged through the woods. So for me, like coming up with a pretty specific plan with a very specific timeline about putting it back to as close to what it is today would be a big deal to me.
One question with what Matt just said, what's the interface look like when you're reworking that trail for access? Are you working with the trail crew, or I'm not familiar with that?
I mean, yes, I think we would work with Breck History and instill some guidelines that we would like to see. Their overall access is important to them too, and making sure they're working and communicating together. And I agree, Matt, a little bit of that restoration and returning, but moving forward, overall, that trail width of 6 feet might be beneficial when we're looking at user groups, maybe possibly more visitors coming up that trail and allowing a safer passing zone or area that it actually might be beneficial. It's sad to see trees go and things change, but moving in this direction, it might be a little bit safer. And then obviously we would, try to work with some signage and maybe some chicane fencing to reduce user conflict, maybe slow down some speeds to address some of those families or folks hiking up to it. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how that worked. So I had a little more concern about this than my counterparts here, but I think it's great. And Larry, clearly you've done your homework. I mean, both of you are you're visionaries and you're very in touch with the project, which is great. My concerns were, I looked to our master plan, and I know Larissa did as well, just to sort of vet like how this fit or to guide our direction on this. There's actually not a ton other than valuing our cultural heritage. But aside from that, it actually, I think, exposed maybe a gap or sort of a missing component for our master plan as it relates to historic structures. So maybe that's something we could revisit at some point. But the other piece was during our COVID era, we had a lot of concern about driving more traffic to French Gulch. And that was a strong sentiment at the time. I haven't heard that as much recently. So this would be one more thing driving more traffic to that area where we see a need for greater focus in other areas of the valley. So I don't know if anyone else is feeling that at all, or if that occurred to them. I'd be curious to hear. But otherwise, I think it's a tremendous project. I didn't really realize how much space that debris pile occupies. So I was worried about that corridor being maybe potentially dangerous or just congested, but I think at the site plan, I was disabused of those concerns. I think this would actually be better than what's there now. So, but I am curious if anyone had any thoughts on the French Gulch piece or our master plan, if I missed anything on that.
I did actually think about both of those things, and that's kind of why I asked the question at the site visit, because our master plan mentions that that's an important component to consider. And then I was thinking, because they have their matrix for Breck history, I kind of was deferring to, like, if this is something that open space values, then I would like to bring in Breck history and have them, you know, also understand their matrix for what is a successful project or a selection. So that's kind of where I went with that. And then for the French Creek thing, I did think of that too, but it is such a pile of debris right now that we have to do something. I feel like it's just too, it just feels a little bit unsafe considering how many people are up there every day. And so I thought that, you know, it's either remove it or restore it, and I'd rather restore it than remove it, so.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of what I was alluding to, saying that French Gulch has become such a destination, and it's always made me feel like I think things have subsided, right, in the last few years. However, that stretch, mini mine, side door, B&B, Turks, there's just a ton of people there. And I think we need to kind of try and figure out a way to deal with that reality. And it also sort of, to me, begs the question, like, if you're going to encourage all these people to be there and put them on the bus and give them places to park and continue to improve the infrastructure of trails, you know, why not do a good job with it while you're at it? And I think that improvement is, you know, kind of speaks for itself. So that was kind of my thought process on that.
Yeah. Your thoughts on that, Dave?
You know, I think it's been said pretty well. I like the fact that it's not trying to create the entire building back. And so it still has sort of this, it's a spot to go to visit and just enjoy and kind of look through the interpretive materials that you guys will put up. And then it's sort of, you know, you continue on your way. And to me, the things that are already there give that opportunity to kind of have these points along the way. So I think people are going to be up there. I would love to see less cars going up there. You know, at some point, whether it's the free ride continuing on up there and the turnaround being a little bit closer up there, or having more of a marked pathway from where it turns around right now, which I think is in part of the plan, or it's on the books. But it would be nice to have that be part of that to prevent B&B from getting filled up. And you know, the less traffic on French Gulch Road, the better. I think you guys are probably aware of what Country Boy has got sort of on the books, or what they're trying to get done is will be a big change for traffic up there. And I'd rather see things like this than kind of this artificial toboggan, Ferris wheel, you know, casino that might be going on up there. So I think this is a great way to respect the history, but also not create tons more that isn't already there.
So it sounds like oh, Mark, did you?
Oh, I was just gonna say, Nikki, that Larry and I were looking down the hill when we were up there off the trail, and there is a structure down below. I'm not sure the significance of that and how if it does relate to the mini mine site here, but it's you know, it's still standing. I mean, it's listing. It's gonna fall over, but I just suggest, if you guys are moving forward with this, keep this on the radar for, you know, stabilization efforts in the near future also. So, yeah.
Trailer shaft. is what it's called.
Okay.
That log structure.
It's what's left in this photo on the left there, the vertical shaft and, yeah, what remains is the trailer shaft. And I think that's been on our mind as well. And the couple people we've had look at it, we're kind of like, we don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. It looks dangerous and scary, but I think
That's just a challenge for us.
that Larry's next assignment.
Tippery.
I don't know, this did not come up at the site visit, nor in the questions, but, I know it will come up at some point, so I think it's better to bring it out now, and that's staging. We will have a lot of, some equipment, material, all those things. I know that the parking at the Riling Dredge Trailhead is certainly at a premium, and you mentioned traffic going up and down the road. So I think that's something where we don't have an exact solution, but we'd hope to work with town and county staff so that we're not impacting parking at the trailhead, but that we're still able to stage down below.
And I wanted to make one other comment. I think this plays in really well with a couple of articles that have been in the paper recently about the need to manage tourism and the idea that you improve the infrastructure of your trails rather than building new trails through undisturbed areas. And I think this is an example of doing just that. We're making it better for people rather than giving them more places to walk through undisturbed land. I like that idea. I think it plays well with what seems to be the current thinking about trail building among organizations that have spent a lot of time really thinking about the impact of people in the backcountry, people on and off of trails.
So this is your first stop to gauge support from all the interested parties. So in our packet, you probably saw it as the contributions from different entities over time for different projects. Do you have a plan in mind of how you would like to distribute that ask over those? Because open space in the town of Breck General Fund have contributed significant money to each of those projects.
Yeah, I guess I can just say, historically, for projects of this size, this one has a price tag of about $360,000. The other ones we talked about today are in the range of 15 to 40 to 60 for Preston. So there's a pretty big disparity in terms of the cost. It's probably evident why when you were up at the mini mine today. But, I was talking to Duke and Nikki. There really hasn't been any kind of established protocol for when open space decides to contribute to one of our projects. It has been on a kind of a case by case basis. So I would certainly kind of look to Nikki and Duke and you all to kind of have that conversation. We really appreciate, obviously we don't do any of these without the town of Breckenridge, and mostly, from funds that come from designated by council, but certainly open space has ponied up quite a bit over the years. And so we're, grateful for any amount that the commission would recommend for a project, any of these.
One clarification from the packet was my fault in formatting the spreadsheet, but if you look at that spreadsheet of spending, there's actually an inaccuracy there, and the Riling Dredge stabilization line should be a higher total. Was that high 300s or?
Yeah, about 370,000.
And that's the project to which the dollars from the Colorado Historical Fund actually went. So as I read it correctly, sorry for formatting it wrong. Both the Riling Dredge stabilization and the Jesse Mill were in the upper 300,000 range. And those are the ones to which we contributed most recently.
So we could do this a few different ways. We could toss out a number and see what people are comfortable with. Another thing we can do if people feel too on the spot to do that at this moment in time, which I think there is an obscurity to doing that. We can think about it or talk about it now and think about it. And I confirm with Larissa, there isn't an urgency to get them this number tonight. So we can revisit the conversation at our next meeting, or if people feel compelled, we could try to land on a number if we choose to move forward with supporting them through funding. We could do that now.
Nikki, I might just suggest you guys schedule this for a future meeting. Because we haven't heard from the council yet. We haven't heard from the county, who we, as our partners, we need to know that they're comfortable moving forward with this. But when we get that, we could certainly include that as a BOSAC item for you guys, and you'll have had more time to think about it.
Yeah, so we could just circle back on the funding amount if it moves forward. Okay, that sounds good to me. Okay, thanks, Mark. Did anyone have any questions on the other projects? Or anything else for these two?
Okay, one other question. Now I'm looking at that with the rendering. Is that the actual height of the rendering, the left-hand side build, or the right picture, the left-hand side of the right picture? Is that the height that it'll be?
Yes. So from the drawings and all the measurements that Larry and Ty have done, it would be roughly 27 feet from the ground to the peak of the gable.
Big.
For reference, those of you who have seen the Keystone Drill Shelter that has just been done, that is about, I believe it's 16 feet at its peak. I'm pretty sure 16 or 17.
But since that's what it was,
Right.
and we're trying to keep the history alive.
I think we're good. Thank you both so much. And thanks for the site visit.
Take the time. And all, for all of your support over the years. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So next we've got our open space budget.
Yes, you got that? Yep. That'll be in the browser.
Yeah, I'll just talk from here.
29.
Oh, no, there it is.
Oh, you're 29.
That's so weird.
Oh, I made it too big.
No.
Great. Thanks, Tony.
Let's start at the top. Is that good, Mark? You want to?
Yeah, that's great, Tony. We can move through it. So in the past, we've had an open space pro forma we brought you, and it had a lot of line items that were probably pretty familiar to you. This one's a little more accounting wise, I guess. It basically, our finance department came up with this. And so, but it's a 5-year, it looks at our fund over a period of 5-year forecast out to 2030 and how our fund will be looking in terms of expenses. So I got a chance to, Bobby had some questions about our fund a few weeks ago. Her and I sat down and we were saying it might be helpful to take this through with the whole BOSAC. I don't plan on spending much time with you guys on this, so don't worry, we won't get too in the weeds on this. But just to take you through some of the things, the top line item there, if you see under, I don't have a pointer, but under 2024 projection, the very top where it says fund balance. Thanks, Tony, that'd be awesome. Awesome. So right there, that's our fund. This is a projection of the amount of money we started out with at the beginning of 2024. This is our fund balance. So if you remember, the open space fund is a standalone fund. You know, it's mainly driven by the 0.5% sales tax. But that's the amount of money we've got sitting in a bank account. Basically, it's for open space use only. It can't be used for anything else. I mean, you guys can certainly decide that we want to contribute $50,000 towards a grant or, Breck Heritage Project or something like that, but it's all related to open space, the funding itself. So you see at the beginning of the year, we had almost $10 million in there. We're projecting that at the beginning of 2025, so one over here, that we'll have about 5 million in there. And that's because we had several large acquisitions, as you know. 3.5 million for Lizzie Load, another 2 million for Little Daisy. So that's like $5.5 million right there. So that's essentially the difference when you look at where that fund balance number is. Nevertheless, we're feeling very comfortable that that's a strong number to be, working with. I mean, we literally, if we wanted to, could have that thing down to zero, but obviously we like to keep a little cushion. So, and as you see, as it moves into future years, that stays in the $5 to $4 million range the whole way across here. So, overall, the fund balance is looking great. And that means we can continue to spend money to acquire open space and, pay for our staff and build trails and all the other great things the program does. I wanted to just point out a couple of line items, right? So first of all, under revenues, these are where all our fees come. Like I said, the primary one is sales tax, but we do get some other revenues from time to time. Density rights transfer fee. I'll talk a little bit about that at the next item on TDRs, but we do occasionally get developers that are building projects that need density via TDRs, and we anticipate one coming up here next year. We've plugged in a placeholder number of 2.7 million, but there's 14 new lots being created up on Peak 8 where there's no density right now. And so BGV is going to have to pay for that density at the tune of right now it's 266,000 per TDR. So, yes.
That equals 1,000 square feet of density. Is that right? Sorry. How
Yeah.
many square feet of density? does
So
that-
what it equals is one SFE. And so for a single family residence, it's unlimited size. Now there's a limit on how big they can build based on the development agreement. They're maxed out at 7,500 square feet. And, but they could build that with one TDR. So they need one for each lot. If it was a commercial project, it's 1,000 square feet.
Okay, that's where I got
Yeah.
mixed up. Sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. So it depends on it. And there's other multipliers for like condos and stuff like that.
So that 2,700,000 is what you're expecting some developer or other to pay to open space.
Yeah, it's
for that.
a placeholder. Now, what that number ends up being, it's going to vary a little bit because we do have to, and I'll talk about this in a bit, we split that revenue with the county. And actually the county takes it in through the TDR bank, which I'll discuss in, but anyway, and then we split the profits halfway. And that money is supposed to all go back towards acquisition.
Then our half.
Yeah, it's probably a little more than that. So it still needs to be worked on. This was done several weeks ago and the number's evolving. So, but anyway, that's a revenue we hope to see coming in starting next year. It may spill over into 2026 as well. Then if you look at the other revenue line items, once in a while we'll get grants like state trails grants, stuff like that. Investment income, that's interest. That's the interest on this money that we have in the bank that we make every year. So we're gonna, we're projecting we're gonna have 300,000 just in interest off of that. Now, let's see, program fees. We charge for, we get out of a couple of our concessionaires, we get some fees for the sleigh rides out at the golf course and then Tiger Run tours. And so we bring in roughly 35 grand a year, something like that through those. So relatively small amount, but it all adds up a little bit. Few other miscellaneous things there. The big one obviously is the sales tax. which we're projecting at, this is finance department is projecting at 3.6 million this year and bumping that up just a little bit for the coming year to 3.8. So that's based on the sales tax. I mean, I remember when that was like 1.5 a year. So it's definitely come up significantly over the last years. And then the last one, Wellington Oro, that's a treatment plant. And that's essentially what that is we pay for all the operation expenses out at Wellington Oro, and then Summit County reimburses us for 50% of that for operating that plant. And so that's what that is. That's just Summit County's contribution towards the plant. So let's see. Then as you move down, we have under expenditures, personnel, people like Duke and company, Tony and Alex and our trails crew and everyone and all their benefits and everything. That's the first line item. Then we have materials and supplies, different services that we have to pay for. Some examples of that are, consultants, testing services, professional services, whole list of things that are included in there. Some of those are related to the Wellington Oro plant also, by the way. It's all combined in here. Capital, minor capital, call it minor capital, but it's a major dollar amount. As you can see, the projection for this year is 7 million. Now we've spent a little, it's closer to 5.5, between 5.5 and 6 million this year. I think it's likely we're going to end up not reaching that 7 million projection. And so just based on what we've been discussing recently in terms of exec session. So it's likely that we're going to be able to carry over a bigger balance into next year because of that, because we won't spend it all.
But you're looking at a lower expenditure next year and
Next year.
significantly less than out years.
Yeah. We've normally budgeted about 1.5 to 2 million a year. Now this year, what happened because of those big acquisitions, they actually, back in July, our finance director, he put in a appropriation to increase that, basically that line item. So we had enough money to cover all the acquisitions we did, these two pricey acquisitions. And so finance actually encouraged us to pump it up towards 4 million next year. I did that knowing we've already had discussions about a couple parcels that could be pricey. And so, but then I dropped that down again they dropped it down actually for the subsequent years, but that's something we can talk about as we move further along. There's one line item down here. Allocation, if you wonder what that is, that's for things like computers and cars and stuff like that. That's taken out of our budget, like it is out of every town budget. And then transfers, the one that's in red, and finance put it in red. I didn't do that. But transfers is when we send money to other funds. So if we give money to Breck History, that goes to their special project fund. It gets transferred over to their fund. And the same if we put money into a capital project. So you'll see a big number over here in 2026. I believe this is 2026, the 700,000, because there's discussions about McCain and doing the planning for that 15-acre open space track on McCain. So that is one that there's going to be some expense associated with. I would say the other thing is we're looking at a rec path extension there to keep running that along the river from Vista Verde 2 all the way down to Coin Valley Road.
And if we do that, my assumption is there'll be some contribution that we'll be looking for from the open space fund for that. So there's a few things related to McKean that resulted in that number bumping up a little bit for 2026, but that's just a placeholder for right now.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that? So is that the budget, the 132,000 that we have, that we can transfer to places like Breck History? Or if we want to give more than whatever is in that budget line, do we then shift something from somewhere else in our budget?
Yeah, we have the ability to just move things around between all these line items essentially. So as long as you're whole at the end of the day, if you exceed your overall open space budget that you project, like the bottom line projection on total expenditures for 2025 is like 6 million something. Yeah, $6,012 right here.
Mhm.
If we got halfway through the year and we said, we're going to exceed that partly because of this Breck History thing, we would do an appropriation then through the town council to increase the budget for the year. But a lot of times it will say, well, you know, we're not going to spend the whole 4 million on acquisitions this year, so we can cover it that way, or there's other ways to do it.
Thank
Yep. So that's an overview of the budget, and we don't have any, you know, really big proposals for next year, other than, you know, the normal trail projects that we have going in maintenance, and then, you know, the capital for land acquisitions is probably the biggest line item. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
I have one quick question about them. Well, this is kind of a budget question and kind of a McCain question, but for the transfer line item for McCain, is that for, I guess it's property that open space purchased, and then the town would be requesting an additional transfer to like pay for the rec path, or is this related to the parking?
It could be for the rec path. It could be for parking improvements there as a trailhead. It could be for some improvements we do out there in terms of, you know, beginner bike trail or other trails that we put in. Now, we may just use the regular open space fund dollars for that, but it's a placeholder, like I say, just knowing there's things coming. And I think one of the things we'll want to be thinking about is planning for that 15-acre tract.
I guess I just don't understand why it's a transfer if it's stuff we're working on property that's already open space property.
Because the Public Works it would be part of the capital facilities fund as opposed to ours, so it'd be coming out of a different fund that pays for it.
Oh, I
So
see.
we just move the money over
Okay.
and then they use it to do it.
Okay.
Yep. Cool.
Do you have other questions on the budget before? Mark, I know it's probably not much, but do we get any money for the content taken out of the Wellington water plant, like the minerals or the?
You know, we used to, and what I heard, because I was just talking to, it was out on our trail project the other day. One of the guys that works there, is it Pete? Yeah, for the water department, he said that we don't get anything for them anymore. The
Oh, really?
cadmium and zinc, that it's all going to a landfill somewhere. I guess there's just not a marketable market for it anymore like there used to be.
Oh, okay.
It'd be a great gift shop.
That's too bad. I was hoping we were making some money on that, but.
I always do.
apparently not. Shoot. Okay, so we'll move on to, did you have a question, Jay? Okay. We'll move on to TDRs. Mark is probably, I'm just gonna go ahead and say, probably the most knowledgeable person about TDRs in the county. Can I say that, Mark? He basically started the program, so.
I started the program too long ago, I guess, but, yeah, so, and Jim was a former ComDev director for many years at Summit County, so we worked on that together. And so I took a memo that I'd already written to the council a few months ago and provided that to you, and a lot of it's land use related, so maybe interesting, but it's not necessarily entirely pertinent to, the open space discussions, but, it goes back to the Joint Upper Blue Plan, which was adopted originally back in 97 by Town of Blue River, Town of Breckenridge, and Summit County. And, kind of a really visionary thing where you get several communities together, it's one basin, and say, let's plan for this basin as a whole. And the whole idea was, let's protect the resources here and let's not overwhelm, our capacity to accommodate development. And, now certainly there's arguments that like, we're already too busy and everything. But essentially what was decided in that whole process was we're not going to allow additional development to occur beyond what's already zoned out there today. And frankly, that's something that happens all the time in communities across the country is, developer comes in and says, hey, I'm going to bring tax revenue to the table and I want an additional, 50,000 square feet of density on this property beyond what's zoned. And, town council says, amen, economic development, let's do it. So we're taking a different approach here than most communities in doing that. But the plan was kind of visionary in terms of its content. And so some of the things it's did besides capping that ability to grow in the valley was it said that you can't upzone property, you can't rezone property and create more density unless you bring that density from somewhere else in the basin. So for example, if BGV is doing a project down in the valley floor, wherever it is, and they need some more density to make that project work, and the town, you go through the whole process with the planning commission and the town council, and they say, yes, we agree, this makes sense here, then BGV has to find density somewhere else in the basin and move it there. So the overall amount of density stays the same. And so that was the theory behind the program. And we quickly realized as we worked on that program that we're going to need to, we should establish a bank, a place where a developer can go to facilitate this happening. Because the whole goal of the program was to protect the backcountry. So the TDR, so the idea is you go into the backcountry, you preserve that, and then you move some of that density off of the backcountry into the urban core of downtown Breck. So, Tony, can you bring up the map? And it's probably just a couple pages later.
Is that what extinguishing density means in your bullet point about commitment from town of Breckenridge? Yep.
I'll get to that in just a second, Bobby. Yeah, right there. If we could just blow that up. Sorry, I forgot I had the mouse.
I appreciated the insert there that shows what the different basins are. I know we're always talking about basins, but other than this one right here, I never knew where they were.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's 4 basins in the county, and the county has a planning commission for each of those basins, by the way. So, yeah, they're busy. Anyway, what you can see there in the, I don't know what it is, purple, it's not really purple, whatever color that is. Those are all what we call TDR sending areas, and that's mainly backcountry zoned land that's out there in the backcountry. And then the blue, a lot of it's kind of covered over with blackish, but that's where you can, if you move density off of one of those outlying areas, you can bring it into any of those areas in the blue. One of the things the county did to facilitate this, and this was when I was still working there with Jim, is we created the backcountry zone, and which limits the development potential on those backcountry, mainly mining claims, to about 900 square feet for a 5-acre claim. And so it's pretty limiting in terms of, you can't build a big trophy home out there. There were some trade-offs with that. We allowed people to use existing roads. They didn't have to build big switchback. We didn't want to see that on the sidewall or hills from happening. But anyway, that kind of provided a further disincentive, if you will, to people to think about twice about maybe instead of developing this property, I should sell it. And so when we originally established a TDR bank, our thought was we would go out and buy this property, put it in the bank. And how you do that is by stripping the density off of it. So what you do, it's called a density sunset covenant. And it's a legal document. And it basically says all density on this property or some portion of density on this property that was originally zoned and assigned is now gone. And it's recorded with the clerk and recorder's office. And so when we do that, then we can move that density into the bank and make it available to some developer like BGB that comes in and says, we need 14 units of density, that type of thing. So anyway, that's essentially how it works. Now, we thought we would be going out buying property, and then all of a sudden the light bulb went off. It's like, open space is already doing this. So let's use the money we generate to put back into the open space funds. And it's just going to further the amount of money we have to make acquisitions. And so that's how this program, quickly evolved. And you see some of the stats in here, but we managed to preserve a couple thousand acres just because of this program itself in conjunction with the acquisition program. But the TDR banks generated $4.5 million so far in the last 20 years that's supplemented the open space funds. So that's essentially how it works. There's a lot of nuances about it. In order for a backcountry land it has to be 20 acres equals one development right. So one single family, 1,000 square feet of commercial when it's transferred into the urban area. So it's that's kind of the conversion, if you will, on that. The county has administered the program over all the years and has done a great job of, keeping track of it all, and they coordinate closely with us on it. We've changed the value of TDRs over time. When we first started out in 2000, they were worth $30,000. Now they're worth 266. So yeah, that's just how it goes. There's still, if someone wanted to, they could still take density and transfer it to someone else, a lot, make their own private to private transactions. It's just that that's pretty cumbersome. And so the TDR bank has been how almost all these transfers have happened. I think we've had like 80 different TDR transactions in the last, 20 years. So it happens. Sometimes it will go a year or two where it doesn't, and then we get a few of them. So, but
Does the town recognize a private transfer like that?
yeah, they can. In fact, I think Mike Dudek did one, and I know Brian Stahl did another. So there's been several, but it's not the norm.
Is that how you can, like how people split a lot? How do they get density for two houses if they have one lot and split it into two lots?
Yeah, they could, if it's allowed. We don't allow lot splits in a lot of parts of town of existing parcels, but if there's enough area, they could. Yeah, so if they wanted to do a subdivision, and that's kind of what BGV is doing right now, they're acquiring these two tracks up on Peak 8 from the ski area. One of them has no density on it, and it's right at the end of Timber Trail, and they're going to add 14 lots in there, and but they need density for all that, so they're going to come to the bank and buy it from the bank. I'm assuming. Yeah.
Mark, can you speak to TDR doesn't have to be a whole amount, right? It could be like a percentage of an amount.
Yeah, we've sold like we've had like 0.05 hundredths of a TDR for a elevator shaft at a Beaver Run. So it could be any amount. Yeah.
A future town or open space wanted to sell their backcountry property to a private developer? And it's already been stripped of its TDR? Do they buy land that has none and it won't be able to be transferred out back to backcountry now that it's been established as backcountry? I'm just kind of trying to think like in the far future, if an open space wanted to sell their backcountry property, what would happen?
Well, so we do. We sell it to the Forest Service. We do these, it's more like a land trade,
Yeah,
but it's all in a valuation. And so we did one a few years ago, and like we took a number of claims that were way out, surrounded by forests, national forest land. Much made more sense for them to manage it. And the density was, in some cases, the density was on it, and so it had one value. If the density's already been taken off of it, it has a different value. It's not as valuable anymore. So that's the case, but there's no development right on it at that point once you take the density off of
Okay.
it.
okay.
So, yep,
Thanks.
yeah.
So when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, when it's gone, it's gone. Yeah. I don't want to get into all the specifics of this, but there's a whole different thing associated with workforce housing. You may have caught wind of this at some point, but where the town transfers density to workforce housing projects, the counties does the same if they have a workforce housing project they're doing and there's not density on it already. And so we do that with the pool of density we own in town. So just like last week, I think it was, went to the council with, we stripped off like 60 SFEs of density off of the F lot in the south end of town to provide the density for Stables Village.
And there's no financial transfer with that.
No,
So
no,
that
it's just-
density actually didn't have a value except for its use
Yeah.
in town.
Yeah, it's how we account for not increasing the overall amount of density in town by transferring it to those housing projects. So anyway, I have probably more than you guys care to hear, but I'm glad to answer any questions, and that just kind of gives you an overview, and it's one more resource we have to work with is the open space program.
What are complete streets?
Complete streets, that's when you take into account not just cars, but you look at, bike lanes, pedestrians, all those kind of things that make up a street in terms of multimodal transportation.
And what does it mean when growth should be driven by character issues as opposed to ability to service areas? What is that telling us?
That we want to maintain our character, and we don't want to get, we don't want skyscrapers. We want something that fits a character of town.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark, does the sending and receiving blueprint, has that ever changed or was that established and it's been?
It's been pretty much the same, Nikki. There's been some minor tweaks to it. We identified a few areas the county did, they're like called neutral, where they don't think it makes sense to either take density out of because they're real close to town or to develop on those. And that's more of a thing that's more fine grained that, yeah, it's more in the county's documents than ours. Yeah. Yeah, but the areas have stayed the same. The one thing I didn't touch on is we have got a little bit into the discussion about preserving wetland lots, not just backcountry. The focus of the program when it started was just backcountry. And we made huge strides in that, but there are these high quality wetland lots, especially in the south end of the basin, that we have included in the program to a certain extent. And there have been some density transfers there using wetland lots. The town about maybe 6-8 years ago, we put a limit on how much of that you could do in any transaction, like only a quarter of the density could come from wetland lots because there's a different value between them and backcountry. So it gets nuanced, but yeah.
I may or may not have stolen this document to share with other people in the county, by the way.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Other TDR questions?
No. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That was
Yeah.
thrilling.
You ever, I don't think so. If you ever have more questions, just feel free to talk to me. I lived it.
Thanks. That's actually it's really helpful for us to hear at least. Yeah. Great. Okay, so we'll move on to our directional trails discussion.
Jeffrey, wake up. This is the part that you
So we'd like to talk about the slalom trail and its current use and moving forward to see what we can do to improve user safety on this trail. We've talked about this trail before. The public has come in and talked about the safety issues of the slalom trail. And I just wanted to talk about kind of the history of slalom. We redesigned slalom back in 2012. So almost, 12 years ago. 12 years ago, directional trails and specific use trails were really a thing. It was very rare, very limited. We actually had one directional trail, was actually the Beeline Trail, was our first kind of directional trail. It's a little smaller than it actually was then. Recently, last year, we did some maintenance on slalom, reshaped some of the features, reshaped some of the berms. And it has made it into a pretty fun, biking trail. And we've come to recognize, as we've seen increased use and increased user numbers out there, we have moved in a direction of recognizing that directional trails do provide a benefit for those user groups, creating a safe environment for them. And so, as we progress with the time, we have incorporated other trails. You can see the Hard Luck Trail in our system as well. We've got the side door area with the back door alternative trail. The Barney Ford area as well with the Barney Flow and Beeline, and then Moonstone as kind of the climbing trail. And in the two areas with the Barney Flow and the side door, it's worked out really well where we haven't made Moonstone or side door like a specific directional trail. We've kind of left that open to the public. And the user groups have really decided the trail that they would like to use. And it's been really beneficial. And I think that's worked out nice for us because we haven't really, said, no, you have to go down this, because some folks might not want the features or that type of style of riding. But it has reduced that user conflict and safety concern that we want to talk about with slalom. Slalom trail.
Tony?
Yeah.
This is the overview map. You scroll down, you'll get a more detailed look at each.
Okay, great.
Is this really just applying to biking?
So we are talking specifically right now on slalom and making that a biking recommended trail. And this would be recommended. Let me scroll down here. There we go. So yes, Bobby, to answer your question, we are talking about slalom has kind of come into a downhill-ish recommended biking area. A lot of folks do like to ride down biking. We are seeing some higher speeds on that. And so what we'd like to do is try to address this situation. And I think, the county discussed this with their OSAC committee last week. And it was kind of like, here's an issue, it's happening, we need to do something about it. We can make it recommended, or we could manipulate the trail and the features and maybe take them away and make it a little lower speeds. And I think, changing an existing infrastructure of a trail, I think we all know what kind of happened with that as well. There are some kind of repercussions that the biking community might say. So, based on our master plan, we have kind of talked about directional trails being a tool to address some of these issues. And I think one of the main points, and I know Jeffrey talks about this is a lot, is having a specific alternate trail to get you to the top of slalom. And that's something, it's not perfect to get to the top of slalom, but we have created other alternatives with the new Ellie's Feature Trail coming up in this direction. And you also have the ability to climb Gold Run to Little Corporal. One thing that we would like to do, and we discussed this in our kind of overall trails wish list and plan idea, was to connect, this Upper Flume area up to the Little Corporal Trail. And that's something that we would like to prioritize and make. But that does take some time, and that's, anywhere from 2 to 3 years from now if we start moving in that direction. So we still have some time before that actually happens, but it is a priority for us. It's something that we have discussed with the county as well, and it's something we will continue to discuss with the Forest Service. So in the meantime, we're looking at what we can do to best resolve this issue. And does that mean making slalom right now just a recommended? And so that would look like, a sign at the bottom of the trail, kind of similar to what the Hard Luck Trail is right now. It'd be attention all users. This trail is preferred in a downhill mode. If you proceed with caution. I'm just making up the words as I go here, but something letting folks know that people like to ride this trail downhill. You're more than welcome to go up it, but if you do, please be aware.
Are there many hikers on that trail?
No.
Do we have any statistics?
We don't have any like specific numbers on the slalom trail. I would say majority of the users are bikers, but there's definitely, I think, some folks that do hike and jog on this trail up or down. And so that would be, something that we would love to address with that alternate route to make sure everybody can get where they need to go.
Tony, is the, well, I don't know if you want to do presentation and have questions or.
Yeah, I'm open, Dave. Yeah, start it up.
So, with all the, Forest Service contractor work that went on there, I mean, it looks pretty crappy what they've done. Which I would say is there any opportunity to take advantage of that before that kind of returns to normal? It's so natural looking with 5 million dead stumps of trees. You would never guess there was a road there. They did a great job.
So we do have some time before that revegetation does take place, Dave. But ideally, would we use that clear cut to put a climbing trail in? That possibly could be, but I think anytime we can use the forest and the trees, it does create that better user experience. So I don't know if we'd actually utilize that clear cut, and the same thing we kind of talked about that middle flume area. I would love to kind of reroute some of that middle flume because that alignment just doesn't make sense in that clear cut area.
Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just like, I feel like backdoor, side door and Barney Ford area work so well together because the climbing and descending routes have such proximity to each other. So people don't have to go looking for it. And I would agree with Dave that riding through clear cut on a hot afternoon is not preferable, but I think it would help distribute that traffic more effectively for sure.
Yeah.
And I do see, Bobby, to answer your question, I do see people on foot because it is like that extension of the upper flume.
Right, and there's a lot of hikers.
And it comes out. Yeah. I wouldn't say there's a lot, and certainly, I do ride it often enough to notice that most of the people do ride it from top to bottom, and most of the people on it are on bikes. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve an alternative route if it's decided that it does go in that direction, because I think it's used enough, and it's a valuable connection between all the Gold Run stuff this way and all the flume stuff that way. So I think it's,
I want to make sure that if we are making something that is clearly meant for biking, that people had been hiking on, that we have a place to go that serves the same purpose.
And I agree. And just to address the Forest Service cut, just because they went in there and masticated everything doesn't mean we can expedite a trail in that clear cut area. We still have to go through the whole NEPA process.
it
through
looks
that.
like, I mean, it looks like most of that land is Forest Service with some like town stuff kind of
Yes,
dotted in.
yes, exactly. So it would take the whole NEPA study and approval process. And that is at the top of our list, Bobby, with that. We do understand that it is not ideal and we could be possibly taking away something from the hikers and runners, and we do want to fulfill their needs. But it might just take some time, a year or two. And, like we said, there are alternate routes to get there a little less than ideal. But OSAC did discuss this last week, and they did approve the recommending of the downhill route as well, just to let you guys know.
I know it can be, eventually it can be changed, but I think it's worth noting that MTB project has the classic Breckenridge route going uphill on slalom. And not that, again, I realize that that's something that can be altered, but I think that should be a consideration going, this is, people have used this trail. And before Ellie's feature, I used to climb it, but I would only climb it before 6 in the morning. I wouldn't dare go after, and so it's, I'm a proponent in directional trails in the fact that it will postpone, hopefully, indefinitely, the need to have odd, even days for use groups. And, if we can avoid a conflict enough through one of these tools in our tool bag, meaning directional trails, perhaps that will stave off that day that we become the front range, and on odd days is hiking, on even days is biking. We want to try to preserve what the high country has for us. That being said, I echo the concerns of not having a parallel trail that is hiking, climbing. And I think that it's a tough decision to make. And there's definitely two sides to that coin that seem very evenly weighted.
But Tony, you're not talking about making it, this is just recommended. You're just talking about a sign at the bottom that would just say it's recommended, proceed with caution. So it's not like closing at this stage. Because is that really the kind of signage that's coming up from Hard Luck? Same thing. Okay.
And that is because in maybe 30% of that trail does lie on Forest Service property, and that was part of their stipulation with that trail is Forest Service believes that trails are for all, and they are not into the specific use. So that was part of their recommendation when we built that trail. And that Hard Luck was actually one of the first trails that the U.S. Forest Service agreed to do that on with us, because we have such a good partnership with them. And it's also kind of part in our special youth authorization agreement. But yeah, good point, Dave. We're not putting a hard line down there. We're just making it recommended. You still can choose to go up it, but just be aware.
On the bottom of Hard Luck, doesn't it have like a skull and crossbones too? Like if you're something to that. It's like
For riding.
Actually,
So given that the Forest Service agreed to put that signage for Hard Luck, we're confident that they would feel the same way about Slalom if we asked.
Yes, I feel real confident. There's only about 300 feet that last little bit before it connects to the upper flume.
Oh, that's Forest Service. Okay.
I mean, I guess as far as directional trails in general, I think in kind of the same way, it's naive to think people aren't going to walk around in French Gulch and see the historic stuff. It's the same if you have a trail that is got an 8-foot berm in the middle of it and a bunch of rollers and stuff. To think that people are not gonna ride fast down that trail is naive. And I think Whitney Hedberg was here last week and kind of said the same thing. And not that, you know, anybody wants to come upon somebody as they're riding, but it is 100% gonna happen if that trail or any other trail remains the same, and given the opportunity to provide what I think we have seen work pretty well, having a complimentary climbing and hiking trail, I think to be able to figure out how to do that is a great solution and helps us avoid the possibility of trying to answer any questions why somebody just ran into somebody else riding their mountain bike.
Yeah. Tony, is there like an ETA on when we would or when we would submit for like a NEPA process for that uphill route?
You know, it's hard to say. We are working with the county. We've kind of got the ball rolling with a few trails that we proposed. And then it really comes down to the Forest Service and their availability with staffing. Like, even though that we will fund the NEPA study, they still need staff to do their part of the NEPA study. And so it kind of comes down to their staff level. And like, yes, we can, if you guys want to propose 4 or 5 trails, we at staff level can handle this, you know. So it's communicating with them. And I think we have brought it up to them. They were kind of, you know, this last spring, a little hesitant about trails and their staffing, but it's something that I think they're aware of. And then we can kind of circle back with you once we have another meeting with them. I think it will be a first priority of topic discussion about that.
Did we submit something recently to them?
We haven't submitted anything to them. You know, when we usually talk to the Forest Service, it's at our Golden Horseshoe Committee that involves Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Forest Service, town and county. And so we haven't met recently. We do have a meeting hopefully coming up within the next few weeks or month that we can discuss these trail projects.
And typically we'll do a package of trails rather than just one, because it takes a lot of brain damage and everything and time to go through this process. So, you know, we might, for example, be talking about Aspen Alley or something like that at the same time we're talking about this.
Well, and that's the one
Yeah.
specifically that I want some discussion on, because I have spoken with some of my hiking buddies, and the idea that we have to share with mountain bikers going up when the other trail is just mountain bikers going down is not met with very much satisfaction. And it was really bad language.
Yeah.
They were very upset that we would have to have mountain bikers on our side, and the other trail was just mountain bikers.
Yeah. And I kind of get that too, Bobby, but I think the main point of the Aspen Alley route and the alternate route that we're trying to address is safety. You know, we're not talking.
That's what we're looking at too. We don't like sharing, if we're gonna have 2 trails.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem equitable or safe for all the hikers, and there are a lot of hikers,
Yeah.
to share with one direction of mountain bike when the other trail is only one direction, the other direction of mountain biking. It just seems inherently unfair.
It might be a little unfair, but I'm going to go back to the safety concern that we're trying to address with coming down and hikers coming up. And there's limited safety concerns with bikers traveling up with hikers. And I think that's like the main point that we're trying to address. And I'm not trying to address fairness and having single-use trails for everyone.
I think you have to think of it in the context not of user group, but speed. I think that's a better way to break it
Well,
out.
a mountain biker, even going uphill, is faster than us walking.
Yeah,
So
but
there
it's
is
it's
a
more
connection to that.
equitable than trying to clump together uphill and downhill mountain bikers. Their speeds are more comparable. Hiker speeds and uphill biker
But there's
speeds.
so many more of us hiking on that trail that it's crowded with us. And then you throw in the mountain bikers and it disrupts the whole flow for the hikers. And it's not safe.
An
for the-
agenda item,
yeah.
maybe we should
And
table.
I know we've talked about this, Bobby, and we can kind of table this. But I do hear what you're saying, Bobby. And we can maybe, I think we talked about putting up some counters and bike counters and hiker counters to look at Aspen Alley and see actually how many hikers and how many bikers are using it. But I think I think we still need to go back to the overall goal is addressing safety concerns. And it's not about sharing and who's using what trail, but we're trying to provide a safe experience for someone. Okay.
So for right now, would it be helpful to go around and get a recommendation on slalom specifically?
Be great.
Jeffrey, I know we left that mic on for you. Do you want to chime in before we go around?
Yeah.
Okay, please do.
I know you guys heard of this before. I think when you put in a lot of berms, high berms, tabletop jumps, and all these things that are kind of conducive for going fast downhill, you're creating an attractive nuisance. I mean, if you had left slalom, if we had left slalom how it was and didn't create these features that kind of encourage at least a kind of a feng shui consideration that it's meant to be going downhill, you'd have less concerns about conflicts. I just think, yeah, if you build it, they will come. And if you make a trail that has at least the sense that it's going, it's meant for one direction, they will. And if every trail, if slowly but surely, all our trails that have a little bit of a pitch evolve to more berms, to more jumps, we're gonna have to build more uphill trails. And I don't know if we have the real estate, the manpower, or also crowding out the wildlife, you know? So I think you have to be really cognizant of every time you build a feature, every time you make a trail that has a suggestion of going one way, you're gonna have to have the more conflict. And also, anytime you have a one-way trail, you're pretty much saying, no hikers allowed, only mountain bikers allowed. It drives me crazy when I hear people say, oh, I was on your mountain bike trails. These aren't mountain bike trails. They're trails, recreational trails for multi-use. So I mean, and also you talk about we should have a sign at the bottom saying, you know, uphill, not recommended. We should have a sign on the top saying, stop for uphill users. You know, Bobby talked about Aspen Alley. There used to be a sign that's saying, you are descending, stop for all uphill users. That's gone now. Now it's that triangle sign. Same thing with another sign we could have in all these trails, like slalom, is expect high use on this trail. So I don't know. I think we're kind of creating our own problems with these things, which are all in. And as far as if we sanitize the trail slalom, yeah, that might do something, but there would be an outcry. But I would just caution, think first before we add all these amenities that people like to go fast and jump over. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Are there any other questions before we go around? Matt, do you want to start? Want to give us your take on slalom, official?
I mean, I think the road and Little Corporal do get used a lot. I think somehow getting Little Corporal closer to the upper flume, or even preferably closer to that intersection of slalom where it hangs the right or goes straight down to the upper flume, would make a big difference. I think for the time being, I don't think you can designate it downhill without having a reasonable alternative route. So I would personally say for the time being that it would have to be sort of a recommended route rather than specified as downhill only.
I agree. I mean, I don't think we're talking about not allowing uphill use, and I'm glad for that. I think Jeffrey's points are really good, that I think the cat's already out of the bag with slalom. Like, it is become a downhill destination trail for mountain bikers. And so unless we do away with those features that we just kind of enhanced, I think we can't ignore the fact that that is a primary use for that trail at this point, and it is a safety concern, especially as Jay mentioned, that there's a recommended uphill biking route on that trail that I think makes no sense. And so I am supportive of signage at the bottom, but I like the idea of putting signage at the top too, saying hikers are allowed on this trail. Because if we do create more and more signage saying this is a downhill trail, even if it's just recommended, I think it could create some perceived conflict with hikers that are still allowed to be there. But I'm supportive. And I think I think it is a really good reminder for us that as we continue to build trails, to think about if we are making a downhill trail, we need to be really cognizant of what's that doing for other users, and do they have an alternate route, and is that fair?
Kristen, do you think it's worth, as Matt said, waiting until there's a more sort of fluid alternative uphill?
Well, I wish we could make that faster, but I know we can't. I mean, I would highly prefer there being an uphill trail, but I also think that it is the way that the trail is built right now, it's already being used as a downhill mountain bike trail. So I think not putting signage up now just creates more potential for a safety hazard. So no, I think that it should be more immediate than an extension of Little Corporal being built.
Yeah, I think, Kristen, what you said about just being more thoughtful when we're building this, and this trail showed up kind of just as people really, we were in that stage where we wanted to build things and hey, wouldn't it be great to do this, and the other thing? And it predated a master plan process that we all went through, and it was kind of it was a lot to deal with, but I think it would address something like this in the future. So I think the good news is that we do have the tools, because I think you're right, Jeffrey. It's definitely, it's definitely taking something that was a two-way trail and we've built it up. That said, there's blind corners on that trail that if the timing were right, you could have a biker landing on top of somebody. And that could be a deadly situation in my mind. I'm hopeful that we can expedite finding a route through there. I think you're right. Through the trees would be nice. But in the meantime, I think there is a yellow triangle sign up there now, but it probably, could be expect foot traffic on this trail. And then I think recommended uphill. I think a lot of people, I've stopped and talked to people who were walking up. They look like they were on, oh, I didn't know if you were tapping me.
Oh, no, sorry. Just writing notes.
Drawing on my
Sorry.
arm.
Sorry.
No, so, and I chatted with them just towards, and they didn't know where they were going. They were just, they had no idea, and they had already gone the last big berm, and they'd never seen anything like that before. So I think it's a little educational because people do come up on the upper flume and they're probably staying in, one of the homes in the Highlands, and they're just out for a hike. So I think it would improve safety, but you're right. We need to be thoughtful about what we're doing in total, including with the Forest Service. And even the history side, anything that we do. I mean, I have a little heartburn about seeing a giant building at the top of Mini Mine. I don't want to see any change, right? I want that to still be my ride, and I know that's going to change the contours of the experience for people who remember it a certain way, but facts are facts. So I guess I'm okay with that, but I'd love to see this. I'd love to see an alternative done as quickly as possible.
I'm not in favor until there is an alternative. I just see this getting put off and put off and put off, and there's never going to be a place for the hikers. I would rather see a warning to hikers, beware, crazy mountain bikers coming down. But I don't think we should make it a one-way without a place.
Isn't that what this is, though? I mean, maybe crazy mountain bikers I'm okay with, but it would be a warning, though, right? It's just Yeah. So it's not closing at all.
When you say it's recommended only for downhill biking, the hikers are gonna take that to mean, well, shit, we're not welcome here. We shouldn't be on this trail that our tax dollars also have paid for. So I think if we're going to make it recommended downhill, there ought to be a place for hikers to hike.
Well, after hearing these, I'm gonna have to take a long look in the mirror because I think I agree a lot with what Jeffrey was talking about, which makes me second guess a lot of my life choices. But that being said, it appears we created a problem that we are now have to solve. And that, it's kind of asked backwards of the way that you would like to see things, processes done. I think to create a high speed route before thinking about how people are going to get to the top of that. Again, it's just something that is unfortunate with how it proceeded, and now it's in front. I think when a recommended downhill sign is posted, I think you're providing rationalization for a lot of users to take that as AKA mandatory downhill, meaning of giving downhill users, fast downhill users, the bravado, the gusto to curse out anyone that is going the other way, even though it's just recommended. And, you couple that with the fact that that'd be the second downhill recommended trail in the exact same vicinity with Hard Luck, with alternatives to, with people who are in the know, right, of where to go, and whether it's LAs or a little corporal, but not an obvious path to get to the top. And it's hard because, we don't do this and then there's a fatal collision, where does that put us? Because like we talked about earlier, it's safety that we're talking about. And so just trying to think of what other mechanisms do we have, whatever levers do we have to pull that can help mitigate some of that risk, and going to published routes and seeing if we can get some of those changed, and trying to figure out a package that we can put them forth to get a logical alternative that is in that close proximity. But until those happen, I would not be in favor of this.
Okay. That's 3 yeses and 3 nos.
Oh, Nikki.
I know. No, everyone made good points. I guess one thing that comes to mind is, I know the NEPA process sounds extensive, but I do sense a certain level of urgency about this trail and Aspen Alley. So I wonder if that gives us enough rationale, despite the cost, to potentially move forward with just those two. What is this? Do you have any thoughts on that, Tony or Mark or Duke?
Yeah, like I said, Nikki, it's really up to the Forest Service and their staffing ability if they would accept this proposal. Like, even though we pay for it, they might not have the staff to dictate for their historical analysis
And Mark,
studies.
didn't you say that just all these features took 5 years of planning to get that from planning to execution?
Well, I mean, that's when Tony and I first walked that route. We actually mapped it out 15 years ago in the Golden Horseshoe Plan. But it probably took at least a couple years with Forest Service, is my guess, for that process. Because we had to go through, get all the studies done, pay for all the biologists, all that kind of stuff. Then for them to queue it up where they could do the review. And that's the part Tony's talking about, is then they still have to review it when their staff can handle it, which they're all understaffed. So, yeah.
So just to clarify the process, you submit an application and then essentially you wait. Is that how it works?
Yeah. But I'm not sure, Tony may have more information on this in terms of if they'll actually accept it, what that process is, or if they're just at some points like, we can't take anything right now. So,
Okay.
we-
Okay.
we'd have to, we can certainly look into it more and come back to you guys with that.
Yeah. I suppose before I answered too, I'd love to just get staff's sense on if it is their recommendation to make this a recommended downhill.
Well, I feel strongly that we should sign this as a recommended downhill. And that would address a lot of the safety concerns that we're seeing and feeling. And then we work towards that alternate route with a high sense of priority.
Okay. I think just thinking through this, I initially agreed with Matt that I didn't want to do this until there was a sufficient alternative that isn't, they're too, as you said, in close proximity, that's obvious. I think Ellie's Features is a great alternative, and the Upper Flume to Gold Run Road works as well, but they're just not terribly obvious. So, Jay and Jeffrey said it well, if we build it, they will come, and we created the problem of like building this infrastructure that promotes high-speed downhill travel. As such, I think I would vote that we do sign it as a recommended downhill trail. And I wonder though, if it became problematic or things arose that we aren't anticipating, we could always take it back or reevaluate. I don't know how feasible that is, but throwing that out there.
And I don't know if words really matter, but if you just said caution, high-speed travelers may be encountered or something, so it doesn't really trigger the recommended, but I don't know. It's not gonna tell you
Yeah.
what to say, but I don't know if that gets the safety issue without really addressing, kind of the taking away from hiker
To
issue.
groups. And I've seen signs like that at other places where like heads up, a lot of people like to ride this downhill or, just providing that awareness. It's not recommending, but you're providing some information.
That does bring to mind talking with Mark, there's a certain level of ambiguity about what recommended really means to different people. Would we want to try softer verbiage as an intermediate step before we go to, now I'm just messing up our whole process.
Oh, I thought that's what we were talking about all along. I thought it was on the table to make this a downhill only trail.
No, we can't do
Okay.
that.
No,
Yeah, technically.
which is
we can't
fine.
do that. Yeah,
Okay, so I agree with you. That's the recommended route is hopefully what came across when I was
okay.
blabbering over here.
But would we want to try even softer language to David's point about,
Like a letter, dear.
sure, sure.
Create
First-
a trail signage
Yeah,
company.
we did.
I know what we can ask.
The vote's just really close, so, I'm not sure, I don't feel terribly comfortable with where we're at when it's this
Yeah.
split.
Can I, just for clarification,
Yeah,
Matt,
'cause I was confused. Matt, I thought was yes for signage.
Port of Downhill recommended slalom. Yes.
I'm in support of downhill recommended.
Okay,
yes.
so as I tally it, Matt and Kristen and David and Nikki are supportive and Bobby and Jay are not.
Okay, my thought, sorry, Matt, I misunderstood. I thought you wanted to hold off until there was a sufficient alternative uphill.
No, I mean, I think I think recommended is just responsible
Okay,
trail
well,
at
that's
the table.
more clear.
Trail.
All right,
I think this, I agree. I just want to reiterate, I think this really is a good, I totally resonate with Jay and Bobby's rationale here. I think this really is a wake-up call that we created a problem, but I also think this is our reality. And if we don't make it recommended and have signage, there will be an incident. As Dave said, like, there are certainly spots where you, as an uphill hiker, would not see a downhill biker until it's too late. And so I just think we've created this problem. We need to be as responsible as we can about it. And really keep this conversation in mind next time we build a trail out.
Okay, so I think in that case, it is moving forward with the downhill recommendation.
Okay, and just to add, those same points were really highlighted in the OSAC discussion as well. What Jeffrey and Jay and Bobby said about creating our own problems to solve and being more intentional with how we build trails. So I think that's consistent across both commissions. And to the point about mountain bike project having uphill slalom as a recommendation, we are talking to them, and I think this like highlights for me that this needs to be a priority. We're working with them to overhaul a bunch of the trails. You know, there's a bunch of stuff missing, like all the parts of Chantilly, Jeffrey, or only the middle parts there. But anyway, I think what we can do is just expedite that piece right away. Is take off the slalom uphill recommended as part of that loop or any other recommendations and get that changed quickly.
Yeah, thanks,
And
Steve.
the other part might take longer, but at least this part can be addressed.
Okay,
And I think, yeah, I mean, working with apps to get all of Chantilly in there, you really created a third of the option, which is, you know, Betty's, Gold Run, or 450, Chantilly, to the top of this same spot. So there's another route you have, like, I think the current route on MTV encourages people to park at the rec center and go up to Upper Bloom by Kennington. But, you know, you keep going up and you keep going to Betty's, or you ride up pavement, which is neat, but it is possible. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Apps as much as
okay, thanks. I think one thing too, really quick that wasn't said was, I think when we build these trails, like we've been talking about, they do by virtue of building those features. I think they become prohibitive for foot traffic. They're just not nearly as pleasant. Like berms are pretty terrible to run or hike on. So no one said that explicitly, but I wanted to offer that as part of the way we think about it. So, but do we see, are we good on this one? Any other final thoughts? Okay, that's our official recommendation. And one thing I did notice, I just noticed is we are missing our agenda items on, of Jay's council matters, and the other matters aren't on the, agenda. So if it's okay, I'd like to go, is that all right, to go to
Yes.
council matters? Over to Jay?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief.
You do your thing, Jay.
New session still.
That's what yes. So real quick, food and beverage delivery program. I don't know, sure you know that it got moved from Tiger Dredge to the postal lot at the Parkway Center, which is a huge win in many different routes, but to get those semis not to have to come all the way into the core of town and to be able to stay on that north side where they're coming is a big win. And we're set to launch with up to 3 or 4 food vendors as soon as a couple weeks from now. And then we're working through some issues with the state, or some permits with the state, to do a couple alcohol vendors shortly thereafter. And then we'll phase into some of the larger distributors. So that's kind of how it's going to go. I want to set the expectations that the second that docking system goes live, that you know, the expectation you'll never see another semi in town is unrealistic at this point, but that will be the goal, you know, 24, 36 months away, plus some robust waste management systems. We have had a lot of housing conversations, and that is on, you know, deed restrictions, on the light deed restriction versus the heavy deed restriction on block 11 and what's going to go there. Stables going live. We have the Vista Verde applications live right now, and so a lot of work on housing's going on. Had an incredibly long conversation about near-term live music at the Riverwalk. And you know, we're in master plan mode for arts and culture as well. So as that develops, we'll be putting a finer point on live music there. The conversation really surrounded having being surrounded by the Dillon Amphitheater and Gerald Ford and Vail, that we're kind of falling in this black hole, and what does that look like? So we're going to be looking for that master plan to help us navigate those. Breck e-bike program has been wildly successful. If you weren't tracking, we doubled the number of docks as well as the number of bikes from last year. and we have seen an exponential amount of trips. The average trip is 1.5 miles. The average duration's about 12 to 15 minutes. This is exactly what we were shooting for, and looking at expanding the program again come next summer with a couple more docks and a couple more bikes. Had a really good conversation on natural healing centers and psilocybin and time, place, manner. This is a discussion that basically ended with and there was an article in the paper as well about this, but where is the appropriate place? Where are the appropriate times? This is a little bit different than the marijuana conversation from years back, just because the entire experience is healed, is housed in one area. It's not a retail establishment where you get it and you go home or whatever it is. And then the most one of the most pressing things as far as open space goes is fireworks on New Year's Eve was unanimously approved by council. There was some concern from other towns on what that would do for traffic. And I don't know if you guys remember from, what was that, 6, 7, 8 years ago when 4th of July fireworks caused an impassable traffic jam across the entire county, coupled with some other events, and made emergency vehicle passage absolutely, very difficult. So we're going to be proactive with how that happens. We don't expect the same kind of outcome on New Year's Eve, but there were a couple wildlife concerns, but all in all, it was highly touted to have that amenity for our businesses. Yeah.
Did you want to touch on McCain?
Yes.
Or drive on it.
Or park there.
So the road is completed and with a curb on it. So the public works access road that goes from Coin Valley to basically that BBC Stan Miller Drive is completed. The work that's happening on the west side of the road looks really scary, but it is creation of a detention pond for snow storage. So when Public Works dumps all that snow storage, a lot of that is dirty snow, and that those detention ponds keeps a lot of those pollutants from going into the river when it melts.
Isn't that a retention pond?
Maybe you're right. Yeah, re-D, yeah, it depends on what letter you're on. So the bike path realignment is planned to go along that road and then be able to jog over to avoid that Fairview roundabout that has been so problemsome. Initially, when we talked about, I don't know if this has been since our last BOSAC meeting, but parking on McCain and moving the block 11 parking that is the free skier parking currently. I think we're all in agreement on council that having it stay on block 11 is probably not the best route. But where to go is where the discussion. On an initial straw poll, we were split on whether McCain was the proper place. It would have been on the east side of the access road where a lot of those tailings are. I think at the moment staff is kind of working with Breck Ski Resort, trying to figure out what other options are out there if the full 500 is necessary, what flexibility lies there, but they weren't really excited about a 4-3 vote, just like you weren't, so that's, yeah, I think that's pretty much what I got.
Jay, can I just ask with the McCain parking situation, how much, if at all, are the land use guidelines for that district coming into play in the conversation in the way they were with like short-term rentals?
No, that's a great point. We did use that as our districts for short-term rentals in justification, a lawsuit that was, we prevailed on just about a month ago, which was great. But that is, I believe, Land District 43. And in that land use district, it says that we should preserve the scenic corridor on there as a function. And it says, due to the high visibility of the district, architectural design is of great importance, is kind of how that's structured. That hasn't been a huge topic of conversation at the moment, but I'm sure, that'll get brought up when the discussion resumes.
Mhm. Thank you for that update. I was gonna ask about that, and I'm interested to hear that the council was split on that, because I think my two concerns, well, I had many concerns with the parking, but one was the view corridor of coming into town and seeing 500 spots, just the first thing you see. And then also had some questions about just making sure we're considering all of the snow plowing that we're gonna need to do for that, and it's right up against like the 100-year floodplain and all of the restoration that we just completed. And so obviously we have that road and we have the ponds that you're talking about, but putting 500 spots and then plowing a bunch of snow melt chemicals right next to that area was another concern that I don't think we'd have a chance to get brought up, because we've so far only talked about it in council updates, but
Where do the buses come that'll be taking all those skiers? How did they get that?
They come in that access road that was just built, that Public Works access road. So, and the other big thing that hasn't been discussed, or hasn't even, never mind discussed, it hasn't been explored, is what's the cost of doing it too? Like, we don't even know what that looks like to remove that rock and to get that all set up. And it also violates the 150-foot setback from Highway 9. And so that's what kind of precedent does that set? So there's a lot of questions that are still up in the air at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. To be continued. I
That's
guess.
right.
Yes. Maybe if there is any other matters, we'll be quick because of our exec session, but any other matters? Anyone wants to?
that was basically my other matter.
It's good.
Yeah, perfect.
Nailed it.
I haven't met it. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Green Ellen.
Bye.
Thanks, you guys. Yeah, I think we'll move into exec session here. Let me get my laminated sheet.
Hurry.
Oh, what's David doing? He's leaving.
Alex has got his.
Yeah, I forgot my little recorder, so we're gonna use laptop. Okay, we'll stop this when we go into exec session.
Been a big one. Yeah.
Okay. We're good here. Okay. I move that BOSAC go into executive session under CRS 24-6-4024E for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategies for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators concerning a property that the town may be interested in acquiring for open space purposes. So present is Catherine King, Mark Truckee, Alex Stack, Jay Beckerman, Bobby Zanka, Nikki LaRochelle, David Rossi, I think, Christine Choice, Matt Powers, Tony Overlock, Duke Barlow, and Julia Puster. Okay, and then I read, or is that, I think that's good. I think I did it.
Nice job, Nikki.
Thank you.
Vote,
Yeah,
Move.
you have to vote.
and second it.
You moved, so someone needs a second.
I'll
Thank
second.
you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And then just